Welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. You're here with Helen Tarrant, and today I'm going to talk about commercial property risk. There's a lot of talk in this market about different risks. It's more risky to be in commercial than it is in residential. What kind of risks are in commercial compared to residential? Look, I talk about how to mitigate, I talk about strategies, I talk about what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, what you should be watching out for in the market. We do a whole heap of things, but one of the things I haven't spoken about is risk. And now I've got 5 risks here on the board, and what I'm going to do is today's an introduction video, but I want you to tune in for my next 5 videos. So this is going to be a 6-part series. So today I'm going to cover off on the 5 major risks in commercial property, and then in each of my next episodes of Commercial Property Roadshow, I am going to cover with you each and every of the risks in depth. So you've got to tune in because each of these present a different risk, and we're going to talk about strategies to minimize it. So I can't cover all of that in this 10-minute video, but what I can is to give you a brief overview of what they are. But if you want to find out more and you truly want to minimize the risk in your commercial property, you've got to tune in for my next few videos. And I'm going to be doing them and whilst I'm on the road in the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to be sharing with you what are tenant risks, what are rent risks, what are location risks, what are market, and what is the most important, which is yield and return risk for you. So these are the 5 key risks from being in the commercial property game, and you need to know those risks and how to minimize them in order to get ahead. So let's get started. First risk, tenant risk. So what is the tenant at risk? Right, so we're talking about rents, right? So we're talking not so much about rents, we're talking about the actual leasing. So most people get rents and leasing a little bit differently. So they look at it a little bit differently. Actually looking at leases and the type of tenant. So what does that mean? It means that if you have a medical tenant and they're on a 1-year lease, there's something wrong with the picture, right? Or if they're expiring at the end of their lease, but they don't know whether they're renewing on it, there might be something wrong with the picture, but it depends on the tenant, right? So is your tenant at risk? What kind of tenant do you have? Do you have a medical tenant? Do you have a cafe restaurant tenant? Do you have a professional tenant? Do you have a trade tenant? Each different tenant has a risk profile, and are you at risk for those type of tenants? So for example, you're going to look at the lease and whether that matches the profile of your tenant. And this is where maybe you've got your yellow flags or your orange flags or maybe red flags that come up, because sometimes you have a cafe tenant and they're on a 5-year lease. But when you look around, you think, okay, well, the tenant can't really support a 5-year lease with all the obligations. So are they going to default on the lease? What kind of tenant are they? Are they a brand name tenant? So with brand name tenants, obviously you pay a premium for in the market, but you got to know if the premium tenant's a true premium tenant or they're a franchisee or any of those things. Or sometimes you might have a medical tenant, but is it a medical where they're operating in there, or is it a medical where they're actually just using it as more of storage space, more of equipment, more of training? How are they on the tier of tenants? This is really about tenant tier and the risk the tenant presents and how they are going forward for you. So tenant history, competition, and what else is there that can trigger for your tenant to leave. So we'll ask the question, why would they leave? Right? And that may or may not apply, right? But we need to assess that. So that's your number 1 risk. Number 2, we're talking about rent. So is it too high, too low, or is it under market that you can put up? Or is it on market? Or for some of you, it might be inflated, but it depends on the type of tenant that you have, and again, whether the rent matches it. Because say, for example, government tenant, they always pay a little bit above market, or if they're government, but they're funded tenants, not pure government tenants, so they're government funding, like NDIS type of tenant, they're going to sit a little bit below market. If they're medical tenant, they're going to sit above market, and they should do a beautiful fit out. So the rent is to, how does it match with fit out? With fit out. So how does that match with the fit out? So that's all part of it, right? So that is all assessing the rent and how you assess the rent. Often that's done through valuation. We can go out in the market and canvas a lot of the different rents. And because we do so many deals out there, we know what market's trending and what the rent per square meter is. But the thing is, the valuation is going to tell you the best way, but also we got to know, just as a general rule, what kind of tenants pay what kind of rent, and if there is a possibility of putting the rents up, or that is not a possibility at all, right? Number 3, location risk. So access, we need to ask the question about access. Then we need to ask about competition. We need to ask about foot traffic. And we need to look at location, right? So when I talk about location, we're talking about where it's located, maybe in a building. If you're buying it in let's say you're buying it in a complex, is it ground floor with ramps? So then there will be NDIS tenant, government tenants, retail type tenants, or professional tenants. But if you're second floor, does that detract from the other tenants? Also, what's your tenant hub as well? So this is where we talk about tenant hub, right? Competition. So, is there much competition competing to the unique nature of your property? Yes or no, right? If there is, what kind of competition can your tenant get up and leave? Access way. So access to major freeways, access way for your tenant to get access, say for their trucks, turnaround, or maybe access way for disability, maybe access way in terms of being able to have other allied tenants. So for example, medical centers always have a pharmacy, similar things like that. So if you have a podiatrist, they might have a podiatrist shop, or you might have sort of a chiropractor, but they might have a chiropractor might be linked to some other allied health, so that you have everything in that one hub. So access as well. Foot traffic. Is it a destination tenant that you've got, or is it something that you have lots of foot traffic and any other tenant can come in here? So that's your location, where there's things to assess. Market risk. So this is whether we're talking about, where the market is at. Right, where the market is at. And where the market is at takes many hours of research, many hours of you dissecting the market, just being in the market to actually know. So unless you're doing 50 hours a week of purely living and breathing commercial, it's very hard to define the market. But market is where the market is and where you should be paying in terms of your returns. And is the market going up? So if the market's going up, what is the right strategy to be doing if the market's going up? If the market's flattening, what kind of properties to avoid? If the market's going down, what you should be selling, what should you be getting out? That is all part of market and defining market risk. So market risk leads to property type. So what kind of property are at risk during that time? So for example, during the pandemic, most people don't want to be in office spaces, but maybe next year, 12 months from now, people come back to office spaces or different ways of working in office spaces. That is going to bring that back into a favorable light, and people want to invest back into office spaces. But maybe for a while, people didn't want to invest in retail, but now people want to invest in retail. Warehouses just had a spike because everyone wanted to invest in warehouse, but they'll probably peter off. So they'll probably level off, and they might go down a little bit because people are going to jump into other types. So market risk depends on where the market is and the type of property you are actually buying. And there's how deep is the rabbit hole on that one, right? And then finally, one of the most important ones you have to know. So many people get this wrong because out there are people just telling you that if you're from Sydney, you should buy a 5% yielding property in Brisbane or in Inland Sunshine or Inland Gold Coast, or maybe you should be buying it further up at 6% in regional, in New South Wales or Queensland or somewhere there, and it's the wrong returns because you're looking from Sydney eyes. Well, that's totally wrong. So that's where you're likely to have your most at risk is your yield and return risk. What is that? That is interrelated with the market. So what is the current market trending? What is the right yields along the eastern seaboard in prime? So you've got to benchmark it to the prime that you have, so your prime locations, prime properties, and then you need to start adding risk factors, whether that's 0.5% or 1%, sometimes 0.25%, and sometimes it's depending if you go up and down the eastern seaboard as well. So there's many metrics that move for that, but live and breathe commercial property, this is what we do. This is why we know where the risks are, and this is where we spend half our time talking people out of buying commercial property deals, and then the other half talking them into commercial property deals because we know what to avoid, what to buy. So looking for someone to partner up with you, really I encourage you, listen out, check out my next 5 videos to follow where I'm going to break each one of these risks down. But these are the 5 risks you need to look at, especially if you're getting into commercial property the first time, you're risk averse and you just want to make sure these are ticked off. We do look at all of these things on the balance of probability. There's never going to be the perfect property or the one that is perfectly have everything ticked off. If we do, you'll be paying 3% return in this current market for it. But ultimately, how do you get a balance out of these risks? And then how do you mitigate it and you get to the other side and you buy a property? So that is where the science comes in. That's where your journey comes in. And that's why you need someone to handhold you, someone to do your strategy, someone to help you with your due diligence, someone who is an expert in this field like our buyer's agency. So check me out, helentarrant.com, or email me, helen@commercialpropertycashflow.com.au. Let's jump on the strategy call. Let's work out what is the right property for you and what kind of risks are you willing to take and what kind of risks you want to avoid. So tune in for my next video where we're going to be covering off about tenants. And I probably will be sharing some of that with you while I'm on the road. Okay. Don't forget to subscribe, click the button. See you next video. Bye.